So this presentation is over design thinking, as you guys know. I know you guys are working on this project here. I'm actually really excited, to be honest, to see that you guys are implementing this. It is something that is, like I said a minute ago, it's really coming into business today, especially businesses that you want to be a part of. It is an extremely powerful skill set. I'll dive into this more later. But the reason it's so powerful is because what makes your opinion count? Who's going to listen to you? Why should they care? You're just a designer, or you're just focused on making things pretty. In fact, you'll live the rest of your life as a designer being commissioned into the club, if you will, the Professional Society of Design. You're going to be defending what you do the rest of your life, and so does really everybody, technically, on what they do. And a lot of people don't understand design. That's one of the challenges that you guys have. But in fact, it's almost fun though, because when people don't know about it, you can get them excited, you can get them engaged in design, especially if you go ahead and talk about it. I've been fortunate enough to review actually a lot of portfolios since I've worked at CAE. And I'll be honest, one of the number one things that students coming out of school, just all over the state and other states have a hard time with, is understanding their work, how to talk about it. It's easy to get focused in aesthetics and making things beautiful and look great, but understanding why you designed it that way and how you got there is just as important. In fact, that's the part that sells. Because when you're talking to a client, you have to be able to convince them why what you have designed is important. Why does it matter? How is it going to get you more business? How is it going to get you more customers? How is it in product differentiation, which is you have lots of the same kind of products, same medicine. How is my product going to be different? So, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the history of design thinking, kind of where it started. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about how I got into design thinking. In fact, design thinking is part of actually an even bigger picture of thinking, right? In thinking, if you're thinking bigger scale, thinking is the process of our mind having thoughts, right? We begin logically, or maybe not logically, random firing of the chemicals in our minds as they produce random thoughts, random ideas. Sometimes for no purpose and sometimes for purpose, right? I'm sure we've had a lot of really dumb thoughts that serve no purpose besides, let's get those thoughts out of the mind. Well, design thinking is the process of refining those thoughts so whether it can be functional and applicable, useful, right? So for designers, we don't just want to come up with any idea, we want to come up with the idea. So design thinking really began in about 1969 with Herbert Simon. Has anybody heard of Herbert Simon at all? He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. He wrote a book called The Sciences of the Artificial. Extremely intelligent guy. And he started off, he started off with this book and came up with this process for creating things, establishing some kind of a foundation for a process for creating things that don't exist, right? When you think of artificial intelligence, you think of computers, you think of design, your goal is to create something that doesn't exist. It's never existed before. You've got to figure out a way to look at a blank sheet of paper and make something, right? So in that process, he came up with a process for thinking, which I'll go over kind of a little bit. His writings were expanded upon by a guy by the name of Robert McKim. Wrote in 1973 a book called Exercises in Visual Thinking. Both of the books from Simon and McKim are both available online. You guys can get them. And the lights are probably put us all to sleep, so I'll try to keep everybody interested. So get out the boring stuff quickly. And after his writings and research on it, he expanded upon the processes from a scholarship standpoint, right? Design thinking has been around pretty much ever since anybody made anything new, a hammer or whatever. But it's now formalized so we can logically think through it and apply it repeatedly to all of our work. But the other part, where design thinking became rampant, where it really took shape, is actually from Stanford. There was, I believe, he was a professor or a graduate alum, but he wrote some articles and really started off design thinking. His name is Ralph Fast. So if you're interested in following the history of design thinking and where Stanford's D School developed some of their current methodologies. They have a 5-step process to design thinking that they teach. That's the history and how you get there. So before we get too far, go to the next slide. Pull out a pen and paper. Let's do an exercise. We're going to have some fun.
White pieces of paper?
Any paper they want, yeah. Just anything you can write some notes down. Okay, so let's practice some thinking exercises. Let me know when you guys are all good to go.
Okay.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to do an exercise. We're going to do 2 of them. So what you have in front of you, this is a thinking exercise, okay? The goal is to come up with as many things that each individual item looks like, represents both literally and conceptually. For example, we have a woman on the right and a motorcycle front end on the left, okay? So your goal is to write down as many as you can. I'm going to start you guys here in just a few seconds. Any questions? Right, yeah, list and write as many as you possibly can. And let's see if you guys can hit maybe 20. Ready? Go. Ready? Stop.
For both of them or just one of them?
Both.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
Winners get free notebooks.
That's how we
it's
got
funny
it.
she said that. One of my thoughts was to bring actually a collection of different notebooks. But for something for later, but yeah. Okay, so what do you think? How hard was that? Was that pretty hard?
Yeah.
Anybody get 5?
On both? Or just one?
Just on anything. Yeah, you get 5 total. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about everybody get 10? Raise your hand, 10. Get 10. 3, 4. What, 15? Okay. What's the highest? Who got the highest?
I got the little 12, but you already said the girl. It looks like a girl. The dress looks like something.
That's fine. You can take mine. Okay. So what we just did was, well, what if I told you kids can get 20?
Oh,
It's pretty crazy, isn't it? I want to kind of explain a concept. Tim Brown. In fact, I really encourage you to write some of these names down and give you guys. They have TED Talks and things as I kind of share names. I've really thought through who to present, what to present to you guys, about how it will be applicable. I'm not going to waste any of your time with anything random. I want you guys to really get a lot out of this presentation. Because it really is the forefront of our field. Because the whole business industry is taking your design methods as a designer and making them global to everybody, accountants, business CEOs, finance, everybody. And the more you understand this process and master the thinking, the more you can teach them and be an enabler in businesses today. But if you don't master it, they're going to know your process is better than you, I promise you. Because it's being taught at MBA programs at Weatherford, John Brown University's got an MFA program. I mean, people are starting Stanford's D School. It is coming. It's avant-garde still, but it is coming. And I just want you guys to understand that. So what were some really cool ones you guys had that you guys thought of real quick before I...
Not that cool, but I thought the first one looked like an aerial view of somebody cutting cake.
I like that. That's
Or
good.
like satellite orbiting Earth. Like a radius of circle.
Microscopes.
Pac-Man eating a line.
What is it?
Pac-Man eating a line.
Pac-Man eating a what?
A line?
A
Yeah.
lion?
No, it's.
That's really good. I like that. That's good. I
Pac-Man.
thought they said lion at first. That's why I was like,
That's good.
I don't know if I see the lion. Okay, let's get- Anybody else?
I said Pinocchio.
That was good.
Pinocchio? The long nose? Pretty good. Absolutely. So just how many ideas you can think of over the same thing? This is a process called lateral thinking. Lateral thinking, thinking like God, I'll get into it in a minute. But lateral thinking is the process of generating ideas for the sake of generating ideas. Like, for example, let's say you have a brand like Coca-Cola. Hasn't changed in almost 100 years, right? It's Coke. How do you rebrand something that already exists? Well, one method is you can apply lateral thinking to Coke and come up with other ways of thinking about Coke, right? How do you present Coke? What people care? How do they, etc. So, but the goal of this exercise, I wanted to make a point to you guys, is that as we become adults, as even my son experimented on, actually on road trips, we'll do this exercise with random words. And the thing is, he can come up with quite a few, but he already has entered the age where he is adding all kinds of filters. You probably thought, I don't want to say that, it sounds retarded, or it doesn't really look like that, or the person next to me, or this guy speaking to me is going to think I'm an idiot for thinking it's a cheese ball with a toothpick stuck in it, or whatever, right? You get these natural feelings of peer pressure, and especially when you present something to your boss or to someone who's going to employ you or whatever, you feel like, man, I don't want to share those ideas. But the only way to get to the great ideas is to be on the edge of the extreme ideas. You know, you have a keyhole, you have a woman, you have the sunset, you've got, maybe some kind of an interesting bullet, you've got a motorcycle front, a bicycle front, you have a cheese ball with a toothpick in it, you've got, an orbit, you've got all kinds of random things that you really can see out of this material because you focused on it, you focused in thinking. And the goal is to practice every day, all the time. In fact, Creativity Workout is an amazing book for thinking laterally. Lateral thinking, which is the foundation, and even Thinker Toys and Graphic Design Thinking are all, and even Innovators DNA, they have discovery skills. All of those books are excellent at practicing thinking because remember, you have to be a master of thinking, of being able to generate lots of ideas really fast. That's what they're paying you for. It's not just your design that you end up with at the very end, it's the process that you can take to get to those designs. So let's do one more exercise real quick. This exercise is same two objects, except now we're going to do an exercise called association. So for the next 2 minutes, I want you to think of as many ways both of those objects can relate to one another. For example, the woman is now riding the motorcycle in a dress. So things like that, okay? So you can use some of the ideas we've already shared out loud publicly, but think as many. The goal is to get as many as you possibly can. So let's try that out. Ready? Any questions? All right, good. All right, anybody get 5? Okay, a lot of people. 10? 10, anyway? Got 1? Pretty hard, it's even harder, isn't it? Because now what we're doing is we're comparing two things together to try to draw connections. It becomes more and more difficult. And the same is true for business. Completely free thought on the most simple items, you can rapidly go through that. But whenever you have to draw connections, it means you have to think about each object, and then you have to combine them. So now you have what's called constraints, right? The constraint is both have to have something that connects with one another. So, next slide. But that was the power of association. So, a little history on my part. I actually came across design thinking from kind of an indirect way. As a creative and as a designer, we all know that we are all trying to figure out what our process is going to be for both developing our great ideas and executing our ideas stylistically, right? It's a pretty tough thing. Anybody have that figured out yet? Everybody? Got it. It is tough. It's tough to come up with really original and unique ideas. Well, I was inspired by a fine art graphic designer named Stefan Sagmeister. Has anybody heard of Stefan Sagmeister? Nobody? Really? Acclaimed to be the most famous graphic designer of our day. He is based out of New York City, has a studio up there. A couple years ago, combined with Jessica Walsh, you'll see on the right-hand side. Stefan Sagmeister is there in the center. Walsh came from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, probably the number one design school, in my opinion, in the country, maybe the world. And she's I think a BFA, maybe even an MFA graduate from there. All three of them are also graduates from SVA. I think Lee and I talked, Professor Zing and I talked today about SVA in New York City. These guys, two of them teach there. Steph in the MFA program and Jessica Walsh in the BFA program. But I really wanted to understand his process. How does he come up with all these really excellent ideas every time he produces work? And to me that's very important because I want clients, and I want, just in my own fine art work that I do on the side and I do personally, I want to be able to control my process. I want to be able to say, you know, someone commissions me or whatever, I want to be able to go through a process or have some way of thinking to be able to have something that's completed or finished at that quality. And so I was drawn to him to kind of learn from him. So I did a paper for Dr. Morales. Anybody have Dr. Morales? Well, I tell you what, he will work you hard enough to where you will learn quite a bit, whether you want to or not. And if you haven't memorized the Chicago Manual of Style 16th edition that's this thick, you will. And actually, anyway, I won't go off of that. That's a little tangent. Anyway, during his class, during senior seminar, we all had to do a project, right, on an essay on an artist. And I picked him to dive into because I wanted to uncover how does he do this? What does he do? And man, is it hard to find out other creative processes, especially how people get ideas. And I think a lot of times they don't know. More often than not, I know that's the case with Lucas films, right? With what's his name? George Lucas, right? If you read any of his autobiography, etc., he basically doesn't really know. He tells you how he got to it by borrowing ideas throughout history and tying them all together, but he just didn't really have a specific process to do. But through research from Stefan Sagmeister, he revealed, one, his first ideas, he gets the heck out of the building. He says those are not good ideas. And I thought, why in the world is he just leaving the building trying to get that first good idea out of his head? It's because the idea didn't come from his process. It may have been a good idea, but it was an unvalidated, unrefined idea. And I think a lot of speech right, as designers, we want to jump into that first idea. Oh, that's so cool. I have no time, my class is having to do tomorrow. That'll work. We do it, and then we produce it, we get it done, right? Well, according to process, that's a terrible idea. Because you don't really know why. You haven't investigated the details. Good, that's all. And so his process, he revealed somebody named Edward de Bono in his writings. And so I began to go, what is this thing about thinking? And he began to process lateral thinking. Did an exercise a minute ago, lateral thinking. One of the processes that Sagmeister uses to come up and generate these really good ideas. But here is an installation work called Banana Wall for each projects that he did. And it's all bananas. And the green ones obviously are more fresh from the vine, the other ones are a little more aged. And it says self-confidence produces fine results. Go to the next slide. Over time, bananas, you can imagine the smell, right? We're not getting all the senses right now about how nasty it probably is. But over time, that self-confidence kind of goes away, doesn't it? And the fine results begin to kind of fade. It's quite conceptual. And it's kind of like our ideas. You know, our ideas may be great for a moment, but over time, they kind of fade like anything. So what gives our ideas staying power, right? What gives us real self-confidence instead of just kind of this fake self-confidence in a way? But anyway, through the study we have, learned about Edward de Bono. He's the author of a lot of books, a lot of scholarship. I believe he was a professor of Harvard. He's got honorary degrees from everywhere. Pillar of thinking skills. A lot of his stuff is so boring as far as some of his really long courses, so dare you tread. But the ones I find extremely valuable are lateral thinking, a creativity step by step, and his creativity workout. I've used the workout a lot because the concept of thinking laterally, let me explain this for just a minute. Vertical thinking. Do y'all know what vertical thinking is? Anybody? Just shout it out. All right. It is absolutely constantly moving up. And you basically nailed it. It's not going on tangents. It's going from, if I need to get to that door down there, what am I going to do? I'm going to go straight from this door to that door. I'm going to start the project, finish the project, begin the run, finish the run, start a business, make a first sale. There's always a beginning and end. It's vertical thinking. You're going to begin at the base level and you're going to go all the way up, right? Start as a mailroom guy, end as the owner. Well, Everbona says, well, wait a minute, you got to stop in parts of that vertical thinking process and laterally think for the sake of thinking. You want to generate as many ideas as possible. In fact, here's how effective this process is. In one weekend of a seminar conference that he did, they came up with 21,000 ideas for a company. So they had a company pay for the conference, and he used lateral thinking exercises with a group of people there, and developed 21. Can you imagine? No longer is it an idea problem, right? Coming up with ideas is no longer an issue. Now the issue is, how do I sort and how do I refine those ideas? Now you have a whole different problem. That's a pretty good problem to have. You all agree? For your senior show? Having 20,000 ideas, actually that might take you your entire senior show time to uncover which idea to go with. But that's the point. The point is to be able to generate as many ideas. Because if you have lots of ideas, you can then pick one. But if you have no ideas or struggling to come up with ideas, that's a very painful place to be. And I'll say when I was in school, that was where I was a lot. And I had to painfully push through it over and over again without really any way or processes to help me generate ideas for my show. I still went through the process, and coincidentally, I just didn't know I was to be able to commit to it. So, next slide. But so as far as design thinking, this is Tim Brown, by the way. He's an excellent speaker, TED Talks. He's got one on child play. He talks actually on the topic we talked about. It's actually a pretty common talk on the concept of children and play and how they can think and play better than we can. Because they can make up stories about anything. Y'all remember as a kid, jumping off of everything, swinging on everything, making tents in your room. As adults or your dorm rooms, I doubt you go and make tents and invite all your friends down to the dorm room to come in and hang out in tents, and lines. Well, at Pixar, they do that. They organize and they make their rooms. They'll bring in outhouses and all kinds of different things into the building to get inside of, to really play, because that's where your ideas can really be unique and where your ideas can really flourish. But Tim Brown, he defines, and I really agree with this, is design thinking, definition is a human-centered approach to innovation. So you notice immediately, design thinking is human-centered, focused on people, for the purpose of innovating, creating something new that doesn't exist, establishing new businesses, new ideas, new designs, etc. That draws from the designer's toolkit. There's the catch, right? Our toolkit, design thinking is from our toolkit that is being spread across business to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. Because nobody's going to pay you for a design if they're bankrupt, right? So this here is Tim Brown. Tim Brown is the president and CEO at IDEO in California, products and services company. They make, you name it. If you ever go and stay in a Hampton Inn, they did design thinking processes for your alarm clock. He comments, actually, I think about 8 comments about it in this book here. Here's Changed by Design. This book here is by Tim Brown. Talks about it. You'll notice there's space too. Talk quickly about environment space, design thinking to be able to really become human-centered and get the focus on people, including your own that work for you. Notice the bicycle hanging from the ceiling. You can ride your bicycle through the hallways. Imagine bringing your bike up the elevator, riding to class, and raising it up and sticking your bicycles in the class. Forget laundry. The whole point is to create an environment that helps you bring thoughts, and I would encourage you, your dorm rooms, your classrooms, anything that you have that can help you think in a way. Find your favorite painter, styles, designs, you name it, surround yourself with them. They say the best language for DLI in the military, Defense Language Institute, California. You learn these languages, they learn them fast because you're not allowed to do anything but speak that language. You can't even communicate. You start off as an infant. The reason these programs are so fast-paced is because they allow that. There's another one in Florida, I believe, that's even better. And it's because you surround yourself with only those thoughts, only those things, only those patterns, only those inspired creatives, only those ideas. But design thinking, according to him, is too important to be left to designers. In a way that can be insulting, but let me rephrase that. Design thinking is so important that everybody should use it. That's what he really means by that. Because if just designers have it that are doing just the design work, how is that going to impact the needs of a CEO or a business? Next slide. So I want to talk to you guys about design thinking and how it's contextualized today in business. Okay, this is I really got to emphasize this and make this understood. Design thinking, there's a reason why it is becoming as prominent as it is. Okay, and why this class is really kind of a foundational paramount to the rest of your career, to understanding these principles and processes. Look at that. That's a pretty big mess, isn't it? Pretty famous image. This is New York City, Times Square. Pretty sure you all recognize it pretty quickly. But one thing to recognize is, how do you stand out as a business from every other business? It's a nightmare today. If I go to the next slide. Seth Godin, he's a marketer and an author. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Wrote a book called Purple Cow, also a book called Linchpin. He's got a blog, excellent guy, really outspoken. But he says, you have to create a purple cow. And he calls attention to the shelf space. He says, think about it. Can you imagine being the first person to ever have to market or design for the first aspirin? Something that everybody's going to buy. It's easy. You don't even have to market for it. Put it up and say, solve all your problems. Right? On the shelf, and you'll get a million hits. You'll be a millionaire within days. Now try to market it. Companies today are in trouble because everybody's already thought of it. Right? I mean, what do you have in your home that you really need anymore? There's not really much that you really need. All the stuff has pretty much been invented. It's still selling. But you look at the shelf, and you'll notice very quickly that there is an issue. So how do you differentiate? Seriously, serious question. How do you differentiate as a graphic designer? You just got hired to create labels. Now we look, a quick caveat, we look at all the design books and all the really cool award-winning designs, right? And I do it all the time. Do you guys do that? You see all this really great work in the design magazines. Let's talk about how much money those designs actually made, right? There has to be a consideration. How would you as a designer come up with a product that is a purple cow? Something so outrageous, so stand out, that it would get their attention and really stand out among all the stuff on the shelf. Where's my ideas? Anything? Color, style. They have color and style. How would yours be different?
No color, no style.
Just a box with a question mark on it.
That's the color of today is white, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Postmodern.
Centrum stands out with the yellow cap and the green bottles right now. The
Shelf dominance.
ones, yeah, they look like they have the bottles.
It's not easy, is it?
We also have multiple brands of the so you know, not all the same brand. So they don't really stand out.
The packaging, if you have a lot of different products and if you package them similarly, then I guess it attracts attention.
Well, I'll tell you how Saatchi & Saatchi, when I was an intern there for a summer and worked on, I don't know, maybe 15 brands. I'll tell you, one of the processes that they go through is they have cameras and, I mean, you name it, all kinds of stuff set up to know exactly where you look, how you look, what attracts you at every single step of your shopping experience. 100% hyper control. And when you walk through, you'll notice two things immediately. The one you see most, whether it's the high contrast product or not, you see the yellow cap because they have shelf dominance. They also have eye height, right?
Yeah.
They have the things that are at the right eye height. They also place things at certain heights for children. When you go through the children's aisle, everything that's really expensive is not at your level height, it's at their level height,
That's smart.
right? So my kid goes through, I almost want to pick him up on my shoulders and hold him as we walk through, because he'll glance right over all the expensive ones and see all the cheap ones at my level, you know? There's a lot of ways, but the point is that there are a lot of other methodologies besides just design that you now have to take into consideration when you make your design for a product. Now this is a lame product. Nobody wants to do aspirin, okay? None of us went to school probably just to do aspirin designs. We have a lot bigger ambitions, I would imagine. So, next slide, please. So Seth Good talks about the purple cow. I don't know if this is part of his exhibit or not. But in your design, your senior show perhaps, or how you're going to talk to an employer, what stands you out among all the other designers, which there are quite a few today? What makes you different? It isn't going to be just your design. I'll tell you that. That just shows that you can execute the product, And if you find a place that just is interested only in your execution and not your ideas, I'd probably find it a place to work. Because they are going to pull all of your execution and they're going to have all of the ideas. And the pay will also be associated with that. And the ideas are really the goal, because if you don't, I'll tell you, as my boss says this all the time, and I'll give you a little analogy. You can have a great idea, right? But if you don't have a good execution, does it matter? But you can have a crappy idea and a great execution, it doesn't matter, does it? You have to have a mastery of both ideas and execution. And you'll learn that between Graphic Design 3 and Graphic Design 4 classes. And it's up to you at that point to develop a mastery of what it is your content and work is about, and then how good are you at building it. And I'll tell you, that's a lifelong career thing. It's a lifestyle of growing. I continually try to grow myself every day, mastering idea development, which is mostly what design thinking is about, until you get to the testing phases, right? Prototyping, where you're trying to decide which execution is the right one, and you're using people to help define that process. So that way it isn't what you think is great, it's what your client and what your end user thinks is great, because you tested it and you measured it, which becomes more powerful. Clayton Christensen is probably one of my heroes of business, and specifically innovation. I actually started off learning about thinking, Edward de Bono, learning about processes from Sackmeister. It grew me into innovation at work, because everybody talks about innovation, world innovation, and I thought, what the heck is innovation really? And I got my eyes ripped open, not just opened, about what really innovation is about. And I found that it's not that dissimilar from creative processes. And that really got me interested. The books I have all three of the books on the left. In fact, the center one is actually Here, the Innovator's DNA. And Clayton Christensen's basically thesis for this book with Michael Raynor and Jeff Dyer is this. There are two types of people in business, and in design for that matter. Delivery and discovery-driven individuals. Discovery-driven people are people that are always looking, they're always thinking, they're always observing. Take Steve Jobs, he would be a discovery-driven CEO. One of the reasons you have these amazing computers in front of you is because he wasn't just trying to make more money, even though he was trying to create a whole new experience, completely push it to what it could be and what it should be. He did that because he was attentive to details. In fact, they were working on a product several times, so his entire career. He was always this networking, going out and visiting people, trying to figure out what did somebody else miss and uncover. He walked out into their parking lot even one day, looked at the bumper of a car, looked back at the product guys and said, hey, you see that Mercedes XL75 or whatever in the parking lot? Here's a photograph of that bumper, it's in your inbox. That's your solution for the edge of that Apple laptop. And it's because he didn't necessarily have the ability to sketch it all out, but he was able to observe his environment and find the ideas because he was paying attention. Same thing for the reason you were able to come with so many ideas for the initial idea brainstorm, right? It's because you're paying attention and focusing in on those illustrations that you were able to uncover deeper ideas. And it allows you to come up with even more expanded ideas when you begin associating it to something else. So, anyway, so Clayton Christensen talks about innovation. And innovation, the discovery people are the ones that are the founders, the people that start companies, the people that create new things. Delivery-driven people are the ones that replace discovery-driven people after they've made a company or built a brand, right? The original builders of the Coke brand are gone. Now we have people in the business who try to make money off of the existing brand, and it's called a long-tail business model. How do I drag out for eternity the sale on that first release of a product? They're probably some of the most successful ones that do that. So innovation and creating something new and innovating something is a key role, and it shows a lot of the comparisons. And right here I've got that listed out. So here on the, as number one, that's the 5 discovery skills. And there's a commonality between all these, and I'll put this in a minute. You got association, questioning, observing, networking, experimenting. Associating the 2 different things, asking lots of questions. I actually applied this process to this presentation. I developed a list of about maybe 50 questions that you guys are going to have to deal with either in your show, right now in class, in the future when you get a job, when you're applying for jobs. All those things I worked through as many questions as I could to uncover what might be the most important. Whether you guys fall asleep listening to it or not is another story, but the most important for you guys to walk away with. So that's discovery skills. That comes from Clayton Christensen's research. They have a lot of presentations on this. In fact, he's on retainer with the top 50 of the Fortune 500 for business. Number 2 is Herbert Simon. I talked about him earlier. Anybody remember who that is? Herbert Simon. Oh man, I'm failing.
One of the first main.
Absolutely, yeah. He was pretty much the guy that started all this design thinking junk. He's the guy that, and this is part of his process. Now, anyway, define, research, ideate, prototype, choose, implement, and learn. Okay? Very similar. Identify it, learn, associate, define the idea, experiment. And you guys have a very good system broken out that I believe comes from D-School slightly, is that correct? Which is a 4D process. And she has that broken out over the course of a semester. It's actually, I really appreciate this because for you guys, breaking it down, you notice this one doesn't seem to be as simple, but I promise you the other ones are very complex in their own right. But broken out, you see how the depths can keep breaking and opening and becoming more complicated. And number 4 is Stanford's B-School. In fact, the first illustration I did the other day, I just sketched out 5 different icons. I don't know if you noticed that on slide 1. But emphasize, you have emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. You have test for bugs, prototype with child scissors, ideate, reliable, define with looking at the details, really focusing in, and emphasize, might have to walk a mile in her shoes to market to her. You ever tried on high heels?
Yes.
Have you?
Absolutely not.
So how do you design for high heels, right? How do you understand your customer genuinely? You can pretend and make pretty things all day long from design, but how do you really know the issues that a woman is going to feel or go through in wearing high heels to a ball or a prom or a nice dinner with her date? You know, there is something serious about that in the fact that at that point you're just guessing, right? At least for us guys are. You girls have got that figured out. But as guys, we're just guessing. We don't really know. We're going to make something look really pretty and try to get you in. The reality of design thinking says that's retarded. You need to really hone in and think through why she feels that way. Why do her feet hurt? Why does she want a foot massage? I'm speaking to my wife right now.
This is more of a relationship advice than about design advice.
It can be. You don't tap that on. I have too much to say. At least I get a lot of advice from my wife. But with my wife, foot massage, whatever. I mean, all these things that come from empathizing, which which is also part of discovery, right? Which is also part of observing and associating, which is also part of defining, researching, and ideating on how ways to fix it. All these come together to, guess what? Create something that does not exist effectively, right? We can all create something that doesn't exist, but to make it matter to someone and actually design it with intention. You guys all have business people you guys are building your designs for this class, right?
Yes.
Right? To really make that product matter for them, you've got to see it from their perspective. And here's the catch, you're at a disadvantage. Because they've been in business for a while, right? They know their industry, you don't. It's the same problem you have whenever you get out in the creative industry, working for an ad agency, production house or whatever. You are always at the disadvantage, and so it helps to have a refined process that gets you to the answers that they couldn't figure out faster than they can being there for 50 years. How about that for a slice of pie? That's why it's important to master these processes so that way you can effectively outthink them. In fact, we had a great conversation the other day, Professor Zing and myself, and when you go in, you're talking to someone, you're trying to sell them on something, what separates you fluffing them up to you actually solving a problem with using design thinking is you remove their ability to argue with you. Do you realize that? You have done so much research, you understand the customer, the empathy, you properly have defined the problem and hopefully vetted it with your customer so they can confirm that that's actually the problem you solve. You've ideated, you have hundreds of ideas. In fact, when they ask you, Professor Zing said this, when they ask you, well, I don't know if this will work, have you thought about this though? I mean, that's way too outrageous, Mr. Gooden. Why do you want to hang that from the ceiling? Well, have you thought about this? Well, sure, I have. In fact, actually, so here are my notes. There are about 700 more ideas. I did 5 weekend sessions over the ideas. We refined them over a multi-month process. And your clients can look at you and go, okay, all right, well, I see you had your ducks in a row. Now you've established a greater knowledge base and understanding than they have, right? They're like, oh, I didn't think of that. It's because you have put on the discovery lens. They have got the delivery lens. Next slide, please. All right, so there you go. Design something. What do you design? Seriously, what do you design? Make up something. What would you design on that paper? Huh? I'm sorry. That's an interesting question. You can't just design it with white and blank space. Any thoughts? There's no wrong answer. This is just free, sure ideas. No filters. Think like a child.
Drawing blanks.
If we have to get up and exercise and do jumping jacks and draw little pretty pictures or something, we do that. What do you think? What would we make?
Empty space.
High resolution.
You can't look at anything. It's hard to start with a blank page, isn't it? It really is. I think as a designer, the worst thing we can do is begin with a sketchbook right in front of us without first thinking, right? You have to think. In fact, you think when you're looking at that paper whether you intend to or not. So here's the catch. You have to add information to the blank space, don't you? You have to start adding information. Can you add any information? Is any information you add to that space, can you add anything? I almost said no, but you know what, you're right. It is, you can. You can add anything. But will anything get you to solve the problem?
No.
So now we have established that we have to now refine at some point. So we can still laterally think, like throw all kinds of stuff out there as much as we want. But at some point, we're going to have to then refine that information, right? Because you can't present anything to the client, otherwise you wouldn't have to do the design thinking process, would you? You can just present anything you do and get done. So let's go to the next slide. Let's add in now one image. We're going to add one image. So imagine real quick, you guys are in the discover phase of your process, okay? You're in discover phase, you've walked around town, you've been sitting in coffee shops, observing people, you've been aware of your business problem, and you look and you a couple pictures as you go. You get back to your room, and one of the images you cross, you look up, you come across is this image. You're like, where did I take this picture? I don't know if you ever get. Say, you look at this picture, and you go, you know, that's interesting. So let's exercise for a minute how you can break apart this image by thinking through, using discovery skills, what you could do for a project based upon, or a business, or a paper, or you name it. What could you come up with just this photograph? Give me all your thoughts. How many you got?
Yeah,
Filtration, water filtering,
Food,
Water filter,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Probably like a bottle that's like a water filter that they can fill up.
absolutely.
bottle
Yeah,
filling.
Same thing.
same thing. What else?
I was thinking irrigation.
Irrigation, excellent thought. Anybody else? There's a bunch here. I've already brainstormed this. Oh, come on.
Is there trash in the river? Or am I just saying it?
There's trash.
Well, there's the other one. I guess recycling.
My designers.
Trash.
Welcome, come on. What else can you pull out of this? There's a lot of stuff here. A lot.
Shoes.
Think conceptual. Shoes. Why shoes?
Looks like we use better shoes.
And better shoes? Absolutely. They don't look very brand new today.
No.
Something with clothing.
Clothing? What kind of clothing?
Well, it's kind
It
of
looks warm.
It looks, yeah.
It does, it looks really warm.
I don't know, does it fit in very well? It's too long.
Washing machine.
Washing machine. I think.
Washington? No, that's not. That's a great idea. It's a great thought. Seriously. What else? What else you got? This is white. How is it going to get stained out of white?
Yeah, I'll think that's this picture.
Where is how to?
I was going to say plants.
Absolutely. Okay, we have. So now we're thinking project design now, even as well. How to communicate. Just lost it somehow. Awareness, right? We now have an awareness campaign. What are we going to make? Who are we going to now make aware? And what are we going to make them aware about? What do you think?
Most people can be aware of different things, but you can make them aware of ways to filter the water, all their different ways to access it. Then we also make people aware of things that
Absolutely. Okay, we'll use the business model. We're going to do an awareness campaign. This is how you can brainstorm this out, right? We now have an issue. This child in this environment has some kind of an issue with water, contaminants, whatever. We're going to design an awareness campaign over this individual. These are initial assumptions, right? We still have to go out and continue to observe and validate that these are, because we have to go out and empathize. Maybe go put on those clothes and go down there and dip water and begin to take a drink out of it. That moment before we drink, when we think, do I have all my shots? You know, do I have a doctor nearby? Do I have health care? Do I have water treatment facilities nearby? Do I have parents that understand the signs of how to look for the problems of drinking water? Do I have, you see how that rapidly can go? It can grow into something tremendous. And we're looking at one image now. We're not looking at a full day experience. Now I'll get rapid fire the rest of it. We have sandbags. Clearly they have possibly water overflowing. Maybe that's sewage. When I was in Afghanistan, in the cities, they would actually have the little canal pieces out in front of their shops that they use the restroom in, both sides. And they just go out there to these restrooms in public. You know, they have long, tight dress type rows, right? So you don't see anything. But they just go out in front, they do their business, and 5 feet away they have a hanging side of beef or lamb. And I guess there's something else on it. And talk about cleanliness, you talk about the sewage. Most water really isn't clean, and most often it can be contaminated rapidly. Look at the contaminants. You don't know what kind of trash and things that they have. Look at the Western type clothes that he's wearing. Those are not cultural clothes for that child. Those are more Western imports. It came from the Christmas shoebox program or whatever, where Christian communities or anybody else that donates to these communities. Look at the shorts. The clothes he's wearing aren't even the right size by hand-me-downs from another child, another village, another country. Look at the trash business that you could start for going out there and finding ways to get people to think about trash. Look at the recycling. Look at the how poorly cut the sides of this channel are. Maybe they need some better way for retaining walls to help control it. Maybe there's a business for landscaping or retaining. Maybe within that retaining wall, it delivers out certain kinds of, water purification tablets ran at certain times at different parts of the channel. So even if someone did use the restroom and clean the water, he looks like he hasn't had a bath in a while, he's been out playing quite a bit. But there's so much from one image that you can draw out that we went from a blank canvas, right, to having a hard time having ideas, to adding one single photograph, and we were able to generate lots of ideas, multiple businesses, design and awareness campaigns, all of that from adding a little bit of information. So I just want to make the point that it doesn't take much, but what's really important is it takes the right information to bring it in, to bring it down. So projector is going out my work here a little bit. This is a project that I did last year called Landscape Experiments. And part of the process was to create something that had a lot of aesthetic beauty in the world, but yet from a contemporary, modern aesthetic perspective. So I did some experiments to come up with a way to kind of present landscapes for my photography collection. And I'm always really big into our world and the environment, not just from a green perspective, more from a aesthetics and beauty. And I'm a backpacker. I don't know if you guys hike or backpack, you like to do that? I mean, I just love it. And I can spend days and weeks out in the wilderness and just not come back. And there's something really deep in my core about that. When I'm outside, I feel connected with nature. I feel like I can finally escape and relax. And to be able to have images or artwork that can help me have that experience without going outdoors, I find to be a treasure for me and aesthetic works that I like. And so in this experiment, I will tell you that the reason it's just an experiment, I haven't applied the style that I developed to a project yet. I'm waiting. I have a couple ideas. But there is a difference in how you approach design work. There are probably lots of approaches, but I'm going to share two of them. One is without design thinking and one is with. Let me explain. This is focused on aesthetics, isn't it? What's the idea? Can anybody pull an idea that I had that was human-centered, that was focused on people, which would be design thinking? There's not, is there? Not technically. We can all draw our own personal experiences at this point because it's in the fine art realm of work, right? We would see this maybe in a gallery exhibit, or we would see this in an online blog exhibit or something. We would be able to draw a lot of our personal experiences and be able to connect with the work. But it isn't solving my problem yet, right? It isn't being used in that kind of way. And so the point I want to draw out is, as a designer, it's really easy to start with making and not with execution and not start with ideas. Can you execute without any ideas? Technically, right? But can you solve a problem just with execution alone? Can't, right? You can't really solve anything. You haven't identified a problem. You don't know what problem there is. You haven't investigated it. You haven't asked questions. You don't know anything. You're just beginning and starting. And I think we all love that. At least I do. I love to just get into the execution. I mean, honestly, that's my favorite part. All I have to, these days, I like the thinking part of it too. My point is, in order to really apply design thinking in design for people who are going to pay money or do business, etc., you have to apply design thinking processes in your career in that way. You may be able to execute, but now it's time to apply your style and your approach. These elements you see on the board. Now that they're up there, how do you take those and apply that to your client's work? How does that meet their needs specifically? So that does go out pretty good. So this is a project that I did at work, and this is using design thinking principles. We couldn't use the full process because we were limited for this project to actually get engaged with customers directly. But with what this project is, this is a work from my boss as creative director. I did art direction on this, and we use our 3D artist to do some of the underlying 3D work that I worked over the top of. And it's extremely complicated. What if I told you this was for a $500 billion contract? $1 billion contract, not $1 billion. $500 million contract. This is for the KC-46 MTS program. It's a mid-air refueler aircraft, the most modified. It replaces what's called the KC-135, which is a older tanker, by 50, 60 years old, mid-air refueler. The fighter jets and stuff will fly in behind it and get fueled in the air, right? So this program is an extremely expensive program. The aircraft isn't built yet. I believe Boeing, it's a Boeing 767 or 37 is on there. Aircraft. But here's the problem. Nobody asked us to make this. There's a 4-week, in order to do business, in order to actually hire designers, to be able to actually do design work, we have to first win contracts, right? So we all love the execution part, but we have to get real often. That I'll try to make it quicker, make the workshop real quick. We have to actually execute on the work, right? To make money in the business. Business has got to make money so we can do more of what we love, which is the execution part. And so what we did was, my boss and I said, you know what, this 400-page document is terrible. I was like, you have to read the whole 400-page thing to get it. And anybody that skims it, military guys, if you're aware of them, skips. We don't want to read everything, and we want to get out there and blow stuff up. So, part of it, so there's a lot of complications, and it's really hard. So government reviewers, it's really hard to understand complex material. In fact, it's hard for someone in the store to find a product that they really need, isn't it? You try to go to the store for medicine, you walk out with bananas and fruit, and you go home. It's like, how do I find the medicine that's beneficial to me? I'm not a doctor. I don't know which one to pick off the shelf. You have to do a lot of research and examination. How do you create, when they walk in, an easy, don't make me think environment where they walk in, they can find what they need, and they can walk out? Well, that was the point we realized, is we had to come up with a design that summarized everything. And so we discovered, by observation, that there was no summary to tie everything together to win this contract. We needed the government to look at this work and immediately say, wow, that's amazing, and be able to get it, the whole thing in one graphic. So we went through the process, went through iterations, probably maybe 100 sketches. 2 of the final sketches, this was for the Army Fixed Wing program, a $250 million program. We were trying to win this. We actually just won, we're about to start that in about a month. But the last one was it's kind of hard to see all the details actually in this deal, but the point was, let's make something visual. Let's try to express the whole process. And so on the previous slide, you saw the student. You saw, it's about the life of the student, right? We try to get into the end customer, the people that actually matter, the students. Even though they're not paying the bills, it's still about them. And I think a lot of times we forget about that, and we think about, in government contract world, all the money that you can make off contracts instead of actually people you're trying to build training programs for, which has been my bent since I've been in the industry there, is to change how we do courseware. It's not good enough to just make money. And I balk at that, because it is about real people doing real jobs that need real training so they can save lives, understand their equipment, and protect everybody next to them. And if we aren't going to care about them in the defense industry, then we have serious issues, which is one of the reasons design thinking, from my perspective, I have been injecting that into our culture, into our business, and into our work and our designs, so that way we can actually care and demonstrate that we care. And that's where this comes from. And so the life of the student, on the left, you see a student walking in. He goes through the process and then he flies out. But it's a little too illustrative for government reviewers, right? It becomes advertorial rather than actually communicative of a process. So we had to get a little more complicated and sophisticated with it. So we worked on the sketching on the right-hand side and developed solutions all the time, testing with our clients, with our folks in Tampa, Florida, and other military guys are in the office. And for the Army proposal, we made this as our first iteration. These are probably about $5,000 graphics with the hours we put into them. not what we would sell it for, about just our hourly cost. And so you can imagine that designer would better sell something great. So this is the second, this is the one you saw originally. You see the sketch process. I just picked the ones that made the most sense to show you guys. The left, we have the general idea developed out and talked through, and the one on the right is the refined sketch before I work with the 3D artist to help actually build it and construct it to make this. So quickly, just for fun, I'll guide you through it briefly. There are 4 major components. We have the right team, we are concurrent, in other words, we're going to be able to build our courseware and our facility and our simulators at the same time as the aircraft's being built by Boeing. All of our stuff will work together, it's all common, and we are going to be building a training center. It's a huge training center that fits simulators and aircraft. We've got 12 C-12 aircraft and I think 6 German growth aircrafts. And the student starts at the top. The MTS program is a maintenance training program. They're going to learn how to do maintenance on these aircraft. They're going to enter in, get split off into several classes, go into their classes, and they're going to graduate, or they're going to recycle, and they're going to continue to loop. Both these graphics, in military land, we have what's called impact indicators. You know what that is? How do you know that your design work made an impact, right? So here's the thing in the design books that you don't see. Really important fact to understand. It may be the most amazing design work you've ever seen in your life, but what you don't know is did it matter, right? Have you ever seen a design book reveal how many products it sold? I've never seen that, never. Probably they don't want you to know because it takes away from the aesthetics of it. Effective design is different than just aesthetics design. You know, it may be a beautiful design, but how did it really capture the customer in the end? It's a really important fact to know. So one of our impact indicators for this was the fact that our work from this proposal got it requested from Halifax, Canada, Montreal, Canada, got it requested from overseas, new Australian partner wanted the graphics to use for their proposals. Our Tampa operations facility wanted the graphics. It is some of the best graphics, if not the best graphics they've seen in proposal work and government contracting. That's because we focused in on what the issue was, uncovered it, and developed the work. And that was a pretty ego-boosting comment, right? You know, it makes you feel good. Those are the kind of things, at least for me, I like to know that somebody values what we do. Sometimes you don't get to know that, and we just feel like we get abused or abused sometimes. But it's nice to know that somebody actually cared. So before we go to workshop, I'm going to do a workshop with you in a minute. I want to talk about something that's really, really important, okay? Really important. This changed my life, actually, in design. And where design thinking, I was really to see how effective it really was in my work. This is what's called a commonplace book. Has anybody heard of a commonplace book before? Yes? No? Okay. Stephen Johnson talks about, from a Darwin perspective on biology and where good ideas come from. Where do ideas come from? And he goes into the biology of the mind and compares it with our world around us. We can talk at length about the details, but the simple thing is, some of your favorite inventors, designers, and authors had commonplace books in the past however many centuries. And what it is it's a book about one of mine. It's a book where in a common place in the home where you write your quotes that you're inspired by, names of designers, you write, here you'll see maybe part of a book and some illustrations of what the character would look like and how he would pose. It is a place where you keep your ideas and your things you're inspired with. And it is tremendous. In fact, I'll tell you how this matters in the advertising industry, at least in Versace land. I was interviewing, and pretty interesting interview process. I was interviewing with the national creative director, Joanna R. Scott, I guess it's now in Chicago. She asked me, I brought my portfolio book in, I was presenting myself to her and my work, which by the way, most of the time you're more interested in you, not your work. And she was talking to me, and she goes, "What are your ideas?" And I looked at her and I'm like, "Talk about my ideas." And she said, "Oh, where are your ideas?" I said, "They're right in my book. I presented them through my work." She said, "No, where do you keep your ideas? Where do you write them down? Where do you catalog them? What do you do with them? And I was so confused. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, he's like, all right, we need a piece of advice. From this day forward, every idea you get, write it down. And I had a catalog of over 800 ideas ever since then. And of ideas, illustrations, I keep an Evernote account that's connected to all my devices, my computers. I can access them on the web. I don't go to sleep at night until all the ideas that are in my head that are, you know, ideas, actually ideas, not just have I changed my kid's butt today. I have a 6-month-old, so. So the point is that I encourage you seriously in your career to keep a journal. All of your ideas. Here's why it's so important. 1 year from now, you will catalog so many ideas that are your ideas that the next project comes up, or you have a lull, you don't know what project to do, just open your book and just look through them. I'll leave mine over here for you to look at. It's got processes from Saatchi, it's got design projects and things, all kinds of really interesting ideas. I could go through this. I have enough work that I could probably keep myself busy for years, doing my own thing and doing my own artwork.
I completely agree on this, yeah. So I guess since I was in graduate school, almost every semester I have a book catalog of everything. I will put this over there for you guys to review. For those who have had my graphic 1 class, that's why I ask you guys to take visual notes, you know, like using different colors. When you go through this, you know, it's not only when you had meetings with people, when you designing a logo, when you have thoughts about in class, you know, anything that you just pops into your head, take it down, because if you don't write it down, it means nothing, right? So if you start noting down, you know, like you will discover like so many things. Like even when I meeting up with people, I will take their head, you know, like shot on my notebook, writing their names in Chinese so I can remember it. Later on, I